Welcome to the Korean Boss and Black Queen channel. This channel will bring you powerful love stories between Korean men and Black women, filled with passion, tension, forbidden attraction, tender moments, and even dark sides. Enjoy listening. Please subscribe to the channel to hear more great stories. I did not steal anything that night, but I still remember the way 3 grown men circled me like I was already guilty, like the darkness swallowing the port of Newark had swallowed my voice too. The power died without warning. 1 second the cranes were humming, the next everything went black, and the entire port froze in a silence, so heavy it pressed against my chest. Then the shouting started. Radios crackled. Someone yelled about a missing military SEAL, and before I could even process what that meant, my supervisor grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise and dragged me behind a stack of cold metal containers. He said my name like it tasted dirty in his mouth. Nia Brooks. Single mom. Easy target. Easy story. They said I had access. They said I had motive. I said nothing because my throat locked up, because all I could think about was my daughter sleeping at home, waiting for me to come back safe. Then the 3 enforcers showed up, boots echoing against the concrete, breath visible in the cold night air. 1 cracked his knuckles. 1 smiled like this was entertainment. The 3rd one stepped closer and told me to confess, so we could all go home. I felt my heart slam against my ribs, fast and loud, like it was trying to escape before the rest of me got buried here. I kept shaking my head. I kept saying I did not do it. They did not care. One of them grabbed my collar and shoved me back against the container. The steel bit into my spine. My hands started to tremble, not from guilt, but from the kind of fear that strips you down to nothing. You ever feel that? Like the world already decided your ending, and you are just waiting for it to land? I thought about my little girl. I thought about how nobody was going to tell her the truth if I disappeared. Then everything changed. A voice cut through the dark, calm and flat, like a blade sliding across glass. It was not loud, but it stopped all 3 men instantly. Who gave you permission to touch my employee? The man stepped out of the shadows like he had been there the whole time, watching. I could barely see his face, just the outline of a long coat and the slow, deliberate way he pulled off a black leather glove. Nobody argued. Nobody even breathed too loudly. The man holding me let go so fast I almost fell. My supervisor went pale, stammering something about a misunderstanding about procedure. The stranger did not look at him. He looked at me. Really looked. Like he was measuring something I did not understand yet. Then he said my name, correctly, like it mattered. From tonight, you report to me directly. I should have felt relief. Instead, something colder settled in my chest, because in that moment, I realized I had not been saved. I had been claimed. I did not go home after that. I told myself I should, that my daughter needed breakfast in the morning and I needed sleep, but instead I followed the man they called Mr. CO through a restricted corridor I had never been allowed to enter before, past locked doors that opened without him ever touching a badge, past men who lowered their eyes the second he passed. The port looked different from that angle, less like a place of work and more like a machine, something alive and watching, every container a piece on a board I had never realized I was part of. He did not speak at first. He walked with the kind of control that made noise disappear around him, like even the air knew better than to get in his way. When we finally stopped, it was inside a small control room overlooking 3 docking lanes, screens flickering back to life as generators kicked in. He gestured for me to sit. I did not. My hands were still shaking, and I did not trust my legs enough to pretend I was calm. He studied me again, the same quiet calculation, and then he said something that made my stomach drop. You did not steal the seal. It was not a question. I shook my head more firmly this time. He nodded once, like he had already known, and then turned one of the monitors toward me. Shipping logs. Container routes. Names I recognized and codes I did not. This is the real port, he said, tapping the screen lightly. What you see on your shift is the surface. What moves underneath is what keeps everything alive. I stared at the data, trying to make sense of it, and slowly it started to click. Containers flagged as aid shipments rerouted through secondary channels. Customs checks bypassed. Insurance values inflated or buried, depending on who needed protection. It was not chaos. It was design. And somehow, without knowing, I had been working inside it the entire time. My company, the one that barely paid me enough to cover rent and childcare, was not struggling. It was invisible on purpose. A front. I felt something twist inside my chest, not just fear now, but anger. You used us, I said before I could stop myself. You used me. He did not react the way I expected. No denial. No threat. Just a quiet answer. I protected you. The difference matters. I almost laughed at that, but it came out hollow. Protected from what? He did not answer directly. Instead, he pointed to another screen, one that showed a live feed of a container being unloaded 2 lanes over. The label read technical aid, medical components, relief supplies, everything clean, everything legal, except the internal scan data that flashed for half a second before he froze the frame. I saw it then. Not medical equipment. Not even close. Precision-engineered parts. Military grade. The kind of thing that did not belong anywhere near civilian docks. My breath caught, sharp and painful. That container passed through my schedule earlier. I signed off on its timing. I moved it. You see now, he said, his voice still even but heavier somehow. The world is unstable. Trade routes are collapsing. When supply chains break, power shifts. People like me do not create that chaos. We manage it. I turned to him, anger rising faster now because I understood just enough to be terrified. That is not managing. That is fueling it. For the first time, something flickered in his expression. Not guilt. Something closer to curiosity. And yet you followed me here. You are still standing in this room. He was right. I hated that he was right. I thought about my daughter again, about the way she hugged me before every night shift like she was counting on me to come back whole. I could not afford to be part of this. I could not afford to walk away either, not if I had already been pulled this far in. Why me? I asked finally, my voice quieter now. There are hundreds of coordinators. He stepped closer, just enough that I could see his face clearly under the dim light. Because you did not panic correctly. That answer made no sense, and maybe he saw it on my face because he added, most people in your position would have begged, blamed someone else, tried to survive by shrinking. You did not. You stood your ground. You thought about something else. Your daughter. The word hit me harder than anything else that night. How do you know about her? His gaze did not soften, but it shifted, like something behind it had already decided. I know everything that moves through my port. That includes you. A chill ran through me, slow and deep. This was not protection. This was ownership dressed in something cleaner. Before I could respond, the door behind us opened and one of his men stepped in, speaking quickly in Korean before switching to English. The container from lane 3 has been flagged again. External inquiry. Not ours. Do-1 did not turn. He kept his eyes on me. Then you start now, he said. You will track that container. You will tell me who is watching it and why. I shook my head immediately. I am not part of this. You already are, he said, not raising his voice, not needing to. Then he added, softer this time, your daughter gets picked up from school at 3:15 tomorrow. There it was. Not a threat spoken out loud, but something worse. A fact. A reminder. My chest tightened, anger and fear crashing together until I could not separate them anymore. I swallowed hard and looked back at the screen, at the container I had already touched without knowing what it carried. Fine, I said, the word tasting like defeat and something sharper beneath it. I will track it, but this does not make me yours. For the first time, he almost smiled, just a fraction, gone before I could be sure it was real. We will see, Nia Brooks. Then he turned away, already issuing orders, already moving pieces I could not see yet, and I stood there in that dim control room, staring at a container that suddenly felt like the center of something much bigger than a job, much bigger than the port, and I realized with a slow, sinking certainty that whatever was inside it had already started a war, and somehow, without meaning to, I had just stepped into the middle of it. I knew the container was wrong the moment I pulled its full routing history, but I did not realize how many people were willing to kill for it until the port started watching me back. At first it was small things. A delay in my system access. A supervisor who would not meet my eyes. A truck reassigned without notice. Then it escalated. Cameras that always seemed to glitch when I walked past. Radios going silent mid-transmission. The kind of silence that is not empty, just waiting. I kept my head down and followed the data, like Do-1 told me to, tracing the container across internal logs that were never meant to be seen in one place. It had been rerouted 3 times before it even reached my schedule, flagged as technical aid every step of the way, protected by insurance overrides that screamed influence. Not just money. Power. The kind that sits in rooms I will never enter. I should have stopped. I should have pretended I saw nothing. But every time I thought about walking away, I saw my daughter's face, and I knew ignorance would not protect her if something this big decided I was a loose end. So I kept digging. That is when the first warning came. I was leaving my shift early morning, sky just starting to turn gray, when I noticed a car idling across the street from my apartment. Engine running. Lights off. I told myself it was nothing. I lied to myself. By the time I got upstairs, my hands were already shaking. I checked on my daughter first. She was still asleep, curled up with her blanket, breathing soft and steady like the world made sense. I stood there longer than I should have, memorizing that moment because something in my gut told me it would not last. Later that afternoon, everything broke. I was on a call with dispatch when the school number flashed on my phone. I answered immediately. The receptionist sounded confused. They said a man had come early, claimed he was family, tried to sign my daughter out. He had my name, my address, everything. I felt the floor drop out from under me. Did he take her? I asked, my voice already breaking. No, they said, protocol stopped him. He left. Just left. Like it was a test. I do not remember hanging up. I do remember grabbing my keys and running. Every second felt like I was too late, like I was about to walk into something I could not fix. When I got there, she ran into my arms, laughing because she thought I came early to surprise her. I held her too tight. She noticed. She always notices. Mommy, you're squeezing me, she said, half giggling, half confused. I forced myself to loosen my grip, to smile, to pretend everything was fine. It was not. Not even close. That night, I did not go home. I went back to the port. I found Do-1 in the same control room, like he had never left, like he existed only in that space between decisions and consequences. Someone tried to take my daughter, I said, no greeting, no hesitation. His expression did not change, but the air around him did. Colder, sharper. Details, he said. I gave him everything. The call, the description, the timing. He listened without interrupting, then turned to one of his men and spoke quietly. Orders. Fast. Efficient. No wasted movement. When he looked back at me, there was something different in his eyes. Not softness. Focus. They are testing pressure points, he said. You found something valuable. Now they want to see how much you will break. Anger hit me then, hot and immediate. I am not part of your war. He stepped closer, not threatening, but undeniable. It is not my war anymore. It is yours too. I wanted to argue. I wanted to walk out. Instead, I said the only thing that mattered. Keep them away from my daughter. For the first time, his answer came without delay. Done. The words settled into me, heavy and absolute. I should not have trusted it. I did anyway. Over the next 24 hours, the port changed. Trucks stopped moving without clearance. Faces I recognized disappeared. New ones took their place. Quiet men, watchful. The container stayed exactly where it was, untouched, like a loaded weapon nobody dared to fire yet. Then the retaliation came. One of the rival crews made a move at Dock 7. Fast. Loud. Meant to send a message. By the time I heard about it, it was already over. 3 men down. No witnesses willing to speak. I saw the aftermath from a distance, flashing lights painting the containers red and blue, and I realized this was not a threat anymore. It was a war unfolding in real time, and every move was getting closer to me. Later that night, my daughter met him for the first time. I had no choice. My sitter canceled last minute, and I was not leaving her alone, not anymore. She stood behind me at first, small hand gripping my sleeve, eyes wide as she looked up at the man everyone else avoided. He crouched down slightly, just enough to meet her at eye level. His voice changed, not softer, but different. Controlled in another way. "Hello," he said. She blinked at him, studying his face with the kind of honesty adults forget how to use. Then she smiled. "Hi, Mr. CO." The name landed between us. Unexpected. He did not correct her. He did not move for a second, like something inside him had stalled. Then he nodded once. "Hello." When she slipped her hand into his without hesitation, something shifted in the room, subtle but undeniable. I saw it. He felt it. And for the first time since all of this started, I realized the most dangerous thing in this entire situation might not be the container, or the people hunting it, or even the system I had been pulled into. It might be the fact that my daughter was starting to trust the one man who could destroy us all, and worse, he might actually care enough not to. By the time we decided to stop reacting and start controlling the board, I understood something that scared me more than the violence ever did. This was not chaos. This was structure. Every move, every threat, every near miss with my daughter had been calculated to push me into a position where I would choose to stay. And now I had. I stood in that control room again, staring at the same container that started all of this, but it did not feel like evidence anymore. It felt like bait. CO Do-1 stood beside me, hands behind his back, eyes fixed on the live feeds as if he could already see the outcome. "They will come for it publicly," he said. "Too many parties are involved now. They cannot risk silence anymore." I turned to him, tension tightening every muscle in my body. "Then we stop them before they get close." He shook his head slightly. "No. We let them come." The calm in his voice made my stomach twist. "You want to hand it to them." "I want to expose them," he corrected. "There is a difference." He explained it piece by piece, and with every word, I felt myself stepping further into something I could not walk back from. The Port Authority was hosting a contract signing in 2 days, a multi-billion-dollar expansion deal that would bring in federal oversight, investors, media, everyone who mattered. The same people behind the container would be there, smiling, shaking hands, pretending to stabilize the very system they were exploiting. That was where he wanted to end it. Not with bullets. With light. "We show them everything," he said. "On their stage. In front of everyone they cannot control." My role in it became clear before I agreed to it. I was the only one who could trace the container's full chain without raising suspicion. My credentials were clean. My access looked normal. I would compile the logs, the reroutes, the internal scans, the insurance overrides, everything that proved this was not a single shipment, but a coordinated network. If we did this wrong, I would be the first one they erased. "You are asking me to walk into a room full of people who already tried to take my daughter," I said, my voice steady even if my hands were not. "I am asking you to make sure they never try again," he replied. That was the moment I stopped pretending I still had a choice. The next 48 hours blurred together. I barely slept. I moved through the port like a ghost, pulling data from systems that were never meant to be connected, building a timeline so precise it made my skin crawl. Every name I uncovered led to another. Insurance executives, shipping brokers, political advisors, even a few faces tied to federal contracts. This was bigger than I thought. Bigger than Do-1. Bigger than the port. When I handed him the final file, he reviewed it in silence, his eyes scanning each detail with surgical focus. Then he nodded once. "This is enough." The day of the event arrived heavy and humid, the kind of air that sticks to your skin and makes everything feel slower than it is. The port had been transformed overnight. Cleaned. Polished. Cameras set up along the main dock. A stage built with banners promising stability, growth, progress. I stood just behind the operations console, dressed in a uniform that made me look like I belonged there, even if my heart was pounding hard enough to betray me. My daughter was not with me. CO Do-1 made sure she was somewhere safe, somewhere nobody could reach her. I held on to that thought like it was the only solid thing left. The guests arrived in waves. Expensive suits. Controlled smiles. People who had never lifted a container in their lives but owned everything that moved through them. I recognized a few faces from the files. That was the worst part. Seeing them laugh. Seeing them comfortable. Like none of this could ever touch them. CO Do-won stayed out of sight, exactly where he needed to be. The event began on schedule. Speeches about resilience, about global trade, about cooperation in uncertain times. I almost laughed at that, but it caught in my throat. Then the moment came. A signal in my earpiece. Now, his voice said, calm as ever. My fingers hovered over the console for half a second. This was it. There was no undoing this. I pressed the command. The main screen behind the stage flickered, and instead of the planned presentation, the footage began to play. The real footage. Internal scans. Hidden compartments. Serial numbers linked to restricted military components. The room shifted instantly. Confusion first. Then recognition. Then panic. Voices rose. People stood. Some tried to leave. Too late. The next sequence hit harder. Financial trails. Names attached. Contracts cross-referenced with illegal shipments. Every layer exposed in real time. I watched one of the men from my file go pale, his smile collapsing into something raw and desperate. Security moved, but not toward the screen. Toward them. Federal agents stepped in from the perimeter, fast and coordinated, like they had been waiting for this exact moment. The illusion shattered all at once. I felt it in my chest, a release so sharp it almost hurt. This was not just revenge. This was collapse. I stepped back from the console, my hands finally still, and turned just as CO Do-won appeared beside me, as if he had always been part of the scene. He did not look at the chaos. He looked at me. It is done, he said quietly. But I knew better. Nothing like this ever ends clean. As the sirens grew louder and the crowd broke apart into fear and fury, I realized this was only the beginning of what would come next, and for the first time since that night in the dark, I was no longer the one being hunted. The silence after the screen went black felt louder than everything that came before it. For a split second, nobody moved, like the entire port forgot how to breathe, and then it all collapsed at once. Voices erupted, sharp and panicked, cutting through the humid air as agents surged forward with purpose, not hesitation. I watched it happen like I was outside my own body, like I had stepped out of the version of me that used to just move containers and count hours until I could go home. Men who had walked in smiling were now being forced to their knees. Expensive suits wrinkled under pressure. Phones dropped. Excuses spilled out too fast, too desperate to matter. One of them tried to push past security, shouting about immunity, about connections, about things that clearly did not work anymore. He was on the ground in seconds. Just like that, the illusion of control disappeared, and what was left underneath was exactly what CO Do-won promised it would be. Fragile. Exposed. Finished. Flashing lights painted the dock in red and blue, reflecting off metal and glass, turning the entire scene into something unreal. Cameras kept rolling. Reporters shouted questions nobody answered. I stood there in the middle of it, my pulse finally slowing, not because it was over, but because for the first time, I understood where I stood in all of this. I was not the one being cornered anymore. I was the one who had pulled the trigger on the truth. CO Do-won remained beside me, still, composed, untouched by the chaos he had just unleashed. He did not step forward. He did not take credit. He did not need to. The narrative was already set, and he had shaped it exactly the way he wanted. I turned to him, searching for something I could not name, maybe an answer, maybe a reason, but all I found was that same controlled calm, now carrying something quieter beneath it. "This is what you do," I said, my voice steady, more certain than I expected. "You do not fight wars. You end them in public." He looked at me then, really looked, and gave a small nod. "Wars never end," he said. "They change form." The words stayed with me longer than the sirens, longer than the shouting, longer than the moment itself. By the time the arrests were underway and the dock began to clear, I felt something settle inside me, Not relief, not exactly. Something sharper.
Choice.
I left the console behind and walked out into the open air, the night no longer heavy, but charged with something new. When I reached the car, my daughter was already inside, safe, waiting, her small face lighting up the second she saw me. "Mommy," she said, like nothing in the world had changed. I opened the door and pulled her into my arms, holding her close, breathing her in like proof that I had not lost everything in the process of surviving. She leaned back after a moment, studying me with that same honest curiosity. "Is Mr. CO coming too?" she asked. The question caught me off guard, not because of what it meant, but because of how natural it sounded. I glanced back toward the port, toward the man who had pulled me into a world I never asked for and then handed me the power to survive it. He was still there, standing alone now, watching everything unfold without ever stepping into the spotlight. I did not answer her right away. Instead, I started the engine, my hands steady, my mind clear in a way it had not been in a long time. The world was not clean. It never was. But now I understood the rules, and more importantly, I understood that I had a place in it if I chose to take it. I looked at my daughter again, then back at the road ahead. Sometimes survival means walking away. Sometimes it means taking control. The only question left was which one I was ready to choose. I used to think survival meant staying invisible, keeping my head down, and hoping the storm would pass me by. I was wrong. That night at the port taught me something I will never forget. The world does not protect the quiet ones. It tests them. And when the lights go out, you either become the target or the one who rewrites the rules. I am still standing. Not because I was stronger, but because I chose not to break when it mattered most. So tell me, if you were in my place, would you walk away from that world or take control of it? If this story pulled you in, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective might be the next story worth telling.